You're watching the free version of Mocha Essentials. Follow along with projects and footage with a premium download available at BorisFX.com.
Hi, I'm Mary Poplin, and this is Creating a PowerMesh. In this exercise, we will identify what makes a good PowerMesh shape, we will explore the PowerMesh controls, and we'll talk about why you might choose one style of mesh over another. Finally, we will look at refining and evaluating the results of your mesh. As usual, we apply Mocha Pro and launch it. So let's talk about this shot. Let's say we want to put a PowerMesh on our friend James's t-shirt here. We can absolutely do that with PowerMesh. We could also try to put something on the side of his face, but PowerMesh is really sensitive to lighting changes, so it might not be the best choice to have shot this in overwhelming sunlight if we wanted to put a PowerMesh on his face. So let me show you what I mean. Normally, if we were going to track the side of James's face, we would use a planar track, but that's not how PowerMesh works. PowerMesh is a subplanar track, which is really cool in that it gives us a lot of options for taking the planar track that we're used to and we know and love and turning it into subplanar tracks, which means we're tracking all of the individual planes that make up his face. So if I were just to generate a uniform mesh on his face, tracking perspective and mesh warp, and hit track forwards, you'll see that as the light shines across his face, it moves the texture in a way that we don't necessarily want. I feel like there's a little bit of love we could give it to make it even better. And you can see around the ear where the lighting changes that the mesh definitely does pull a little bit. So how do we create a successful mesh? Well, for one thing, we plan our shot. We want to make sure that we don't have so many occlusions that we can't create a power mesh. We also want to make sure that our lighting change is not so harsh that the lighting itself becomes an occlusion. Now, luckily, I'm working with gigantic files here, so we have nice big 4K shots to look at texture with. The lower res your image, the more trouble you're going to have getting subplanar tracks. So how do we create a power mesh? Well, first, I'm going to create a spline that's larger than the area that I want to put an object on. So in this case, we'd like to put something on James's t-shirt. No problem. Now we can decide what kind of power mesh we want to create. PowerMesh does use planar data, so we actually do need to use the appropriate translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective parameters that we're used to, but now we have mesh down here. When we click mesh, it creates automatically a PowerMesh grid for us, which is uniform by default, but we could also do automatic as well. So what's the difference between uniform and automatic, and why would you want to use them? And this is pretty easy to explain. For things like faces and cloth, or for objects that you need to capture a lot of detail for, uniform can be a really good option. But for things like bare skin and smooth organic objects, or for rotoscoping, automatic is often a really good choice. So for this shirt, my best bet is actually using uniform. But let's clear this mesh and hit Generate Uniform Mesh. Now, a good default size is 32, but you can make this mesh larger or smaller depending on how much detail you need in your power mesh. When using automatic mesh generation, you can use adaptive contrast to get even more detail in your automatic generation, but we're going to use uniform, and adaptive contrast doesn't matter for uniform. Generate mesh. You can always clear and regenerate mesh however often you like. And let's talk a little bit about smoothness. By default, the smoothness is at 50. And you can think of smoothness as a starchiness or how much the subplanar tracks respect the overall planar track. So how much they deviate from the overall planar track. A piece of paper might have a very high smoothness, something like 80, whereas water might have 0 to 10. In this case, 50 is perfect for a t-shirt or a face or anything like that. Now, before I start tracking, I actually want to talk a little bit about this mask. Notice how the mask goes outside the edges of the object. Normally, when we're creating a planar track, that's what we want. But in PowerMesh is really sensitive. So we actually want to track inside of the object. That means we don't want to track the neck. We don't want to track the edges of the shirt. And we don't want to track necessarily the shoulders either. So let's come in from the shoulders. I can turn my mesh back on and off with this button here, Show Mesh. And now when I track, I'm not going to track these outside points, but they're going to anchor my texture for me. This is really handy when you have somebody who's turning and you need that extra data. Otherwise, whatever you tried to put on the shirt would be cut off. Now we're going to hit track forwards. So now let's hit play and let's look at that nice deformation across the chest with the breathing in and out and as the body turns. I feel very confident that I could put any logo on that shirt and have it look like it's glued to it. But how do we do the same thing to the side of the face? In this case, I just avoid the ear entirely and track all of this nice detail here. And because this is bare skin, I'm going to try automatic with adaptive contrast and generate that mesh. We're going to track with perspective and mesh tracking on and hit track forwards. By default, warp spline is on when we hit track. For most of your PowerMesh tracks, you're going to want warp spline on, and you'll absolutely want to use warp spline when you use PowerMesh to create rotoscoping shapes. And this is a much more beautiful track than we got at the beginning of our example. So I see we have some problem points over here. And that's no problem at all. We can click our Edit the Track Mesh. Just select these points with our point selection tool and remove them. We could also hand animate those points if we wanted. All right, so we talked about evaluating the shot, making a plan, uniform versus automatic meshes, secrets of the smoothness, and tracking the face. Now we'll move on to PowerMesh tracking tips.
You've been watching the free version of Mocha Essentials. To download all videos, projects and footage, purchase the premium version available at BorisFX.com.